Jay Bob. And I'm really enjoying my visit here immensely, being able to see everyone and many faces that I recognize, new people that I meet. And I think the atmosphere and the spirit of Baba here just can't be beat anywhere. It's his love and his presence and atmosphere is very strong here.
She said it might be the fan. I'm going to turn it down.
No, well, the fan is all right for me, but I'm just, whatever you want.
I don't know.
But I think we're getting some feedback.
No, I'm trying to get it up higher.
Okay.
Is it because of this?
No.
You hear it all right?
Yeah, all right.
Good. If I go any higher, it's going to go.
All right. You know, I was thinking as to where I might like to start to talk about the experiences that I was very fortunate and privileged to have. Because I had the opportunity of meeting and being with Baba on actually four separate occasions. And between that time, there was incredible correspondence over a period of 10 years from the time that I heard about Meherabad, which was at the end of 1959. And having met him in May of 1960 for the first time. But it was not easy because my dad was not a person that could understand or had any type of search as my brother and I had to get to Bob. It was my brother that heard about Bob first. He read this book, Listen Humanity, which he found quite by accident in the library in New York. Now, if any of you are familiar with the New York Library on 42nd Street, it's an enormous building. It's about 3 blocks around, and 3 stories high, and it must have millions of books in it. So he was looking for a book to further his acting career. And what happens, he sees this book, Listen Humanity, on the shelf, which had absolutely nothing to do with acting. But just by the title, Listen Humanity, he thought, oh, there must be something that this author really wants to say, that he should call his book Listen Humanity. What is it that he wants to say? So he took this book off the shelf, and my brother was the type of person that didn't like to read books. And this was a thick book, and he was weighing the book like this, to see whether he really wanted to read this book. So he opened it up, and he found a few things that he happened to glance at that interested him, and he decided he would take the book out, providing the library didn't give him any difficulty in taking the book out since he didn't have a library card. So as soon as he came to the librarian and said, can I take this book out? She jumped up and she said, yes, of course you can take the book out, and there's nothing to it. All you got to do is sign this here and you can take it. So that was, I thought it was like Baba, making it real easy. So anyhow, he did read it, and he called me up, and he told me that he had read a book about a master who lives in India, and his name is Meherabad. And I said, who? And he said, Meherabad. And I was trying to pronounce the name, and we was going back and forth on this. This is the Meher. I said, Meherabad. And we kept repeating until finally I got it. And then I wasn't even interested. Mainly because I was already, I felt having a lot of inner guidance, inner direction over the last 3 years prior to this happening. And I wasn't looking for a master. But since he came across that and he was saying this, so he talked about it, and that was it. I sort of let it go at that point, and he didn't say anything more. And about 3 months went by, And during the course of this time, I had a very strong inner feeling. See, I'm sort of skipping ahead of this part of the story, but for 3 years, I had felt that I was being internally guided and directed, that God was really with me, and He was really guiding me. And one of the first things that I was guided to do, I will put it that way, not that I was hearing voices or anything, but it was the internal direction. And one of the first things was that I should read what the founders of the great religions of the world had to say, but only their words and not those of their followers. That was what my first direction was. And I did. I started to read. I read the 5 books of Moses, and then the 4 Gospels of Jesus, and the Quran of Muhammad, and the Gita of Krishna, and there's a book called the Buddhist Bible. Buddha doesn't really have a Bible, but there was the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths, and many other things that he had said. And while I was reading all of these things, which took a while to do, I realized that they were all saying, in principle, the same thing. Even though later their followers created many different types of traditions to be followed, and rituals and ceremonials, and their own holidays and things of the sort. But the originator, they were all expressing essentially the same love and truth and goal for the realization of the highest consciousness, which was quite transcendent to this world. Anyhow, in realizing all of this, I wasn't just reading it for an intellectual understanding of it. I was also trying to practice a lot of the principles that were being laid down by these masters. And I later began to feel that if they were all together in one room, had Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad and Krishna all had been together in one room, they would have gotten along fine with each other, regardless of how their followers felt with all the wars and everything. But still, the principles were the same. Well, all of this, together with a lot of other things that happened with me, really did prepare me to understand what MeherBaba would be saying later once I came to know about him. And I remember that when I was I had to tell my father, because I had a very strong intuition that I should go to New York, where I would gain a communication with God. This was what I had experienced for myself. And this was after my brother had told me about MeherBaba, but I hadn't really thought or connected this to MeherBaba at all. And I thought, well, how am I going to tell my father this? He's so worldly-minded, and I'm so much interested in his business and, my welfare in a very practical way in the world. How am I going to tell him this? So I said to my dad, I said, Dad, I'm planning to leave to go to New York, because I was living with him in his house and also working with him in his business. So I said, I plan to go to New York, and he says, when do you plan to do that? I said, as soon as possible. And he said, why would you want to go to New York? And he couldn't understand. I said, well, Dad, I don't know how to tell you this, but I feel that if I were to go to New York, I would gain a communication with God. He says to me, why do these things always have to happen to me? I said, that's okay. It's not happening to you, it's happening to me. And besides, I said, look, I'm not trying to explain this. and I don't really know what's going to happen. But I know that whenever I followed my inner guidance, it always worked out right, and it always worked out where it was for the best. So I feel that this is my next step, and anyhow, that's what I plan to do. So,
Electricity went off.
I might have to come up closer.
do you want me to continue?
Yes, is it okay? Can everyone hear?
I'll just talk louder, that's all.
What, back on?
No, it's okay.
It's off.
We're working on Gus's now.
Oh, ha.
What are they doing?
This is off the record now.
What?
So this won't be taped, so you can say.
Ha, I'm taking it.
I'm taping it.
What'd you say, Steve? Whose house are they working on?
So, I said to my dad that I would be leaving, and he says to me, well, if you go to New York, what do you think will happen? Do you expect to go up into the mountains and receive God's commandments, and you're going to come down? And what do you want to do? Be a prophet? Be a prophet for a living? That's the way he thinks. I said, no, Dad. I think that's been done anyhow before, and I don't think that God's going to do the same thing twice. And that's not what I have in mind at all. I have no idea. I just leave these things to whatever is meant to be will be. So he says, well, you can't go. I said, why? He said, because you have your family here, you have your friends here, you have your, all your possessions are here, your work is here. Everything is here. There's nothing for you over there. So how can you just leave all that and you'll go? There'll be nothing there. So I said, well, Dad, you know, everything you said is okay, except for one thing. This is the inner direction that I have, and I'm not going with expectations. So we'll just see what happens. If nothing happens, so what? I come back and I'm here. And if it does occur, whatever God would want for me, then that will be to everybody's advantage, and it will certainly be to my advantage. So I'm going to see this through. And I left, in 2 weeks I left. Now I come to New York with $70 in my pocket. And let me tell you, even in 1960, this was really very little. This was a very small amount. And I checked into this hotel where I had rented a room. And it was near 42nd Street. It was a pretty, you know, I guess a dumpy area, but it was fine. I could afford it, you know, for a little while anyhow. And I read their stationery. You know, they had this stationery in the hotel. It says, Hotel Remington, absolutely fireproof. It makes you wonder, you know, why do they have to make this claim? Do they expect something to happen? So, I'll try and help you out with this one. So, anyhow, I did this meditation, which was very successful for me, and I did it for about 4 days, and absolutely nothing was happening. So, I didn't know, well, God, here I am. I mean, these are very famous words that many people have used. God, here I am. What do you want me to do? I am here. I followed it through. And on the 4th day, I went downstairs, and there was a church next door. It was a Catholic church, and my brother seemed to have known one of the priests there. And he had said to me, well, when you go, meet this man. He's a nice guy. And so I go in, and and nothing else was happening. So I went to meet him, and we talked, and he showed me some of his nice paintings that he had, and which he thought would be world-renowned one day. And then he said to me, we discussed why I was there, and he said to me, it's a very good book. It's called Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda. And he was a young fellow that was also seeking and searching, and he found and he met many saints and many different spiritual personalities, and some of them had extraordinary experiences that they gave him, and there was really some extraordinary people and the people that he met. He wrote this book, and then he also met his master, the one that was to be the one to guide him and direct him in his life. So he said, "You'd really like this book if you read it." And I'm thinking to myself, I'm Jewish. I'm talking to this Catholic priest. I've come to find God. He's telling me about a yogi. Somehow, there's a lot of inconsistencies here. But anyhow, he really was a nice guy. And so I went to the library to take out this book. I thought, well, what's the harm? I'll read this. And they refused to let the book out. They said the book has already been out. But if I want to, I can read the book, the copy that they only keep in the library and never let out. I said, is that right? You do that? He said, yes, this is what we do here. So, all right. So I spent about 2 or 3 days reading this book. And in the course of reading it, I must say this, that I did find it really interesting. It was really fascinating. The people that this Yogananda had met, that was his name later. And he, but in the course of reading the book, I remembered what my brother was saying about Meherabad being a master. And I thought, you know, I hope that Meherabad is at least as high a master as the master of this Yogananda. His name was Shri Tesman. He gave this Yogananda incredible experiences in which he opened his consciousness in the universe, and everything was available to him. He could see it within himself, and he could see what God was. It was really, I mean, it's really something to read some of these experiences he had. And I thought, well, this is not dry at all. This is not like sitting and meditating and nothing happens, you know, and you just try to calm yourself or like that. This was quite different. And then I was wondering if Meherabad was a master that was at least as high as the master of Yogananda. And I kept thinking, you know, I got to read this book that my brother's found. Now I was interested to read it. And after he had, so anyhow, so then I asked for that book, and I was able to read it. Now, the thing that really impressed me about Baba was the work that he did with the poor and the lepers. In other words, his tremendous love. I really was impressed by Baba's love, the way he would bow down to the poor and to the lepers, and he would wash their feet, and he would tell them that God was equally in them as in himself. But the difference is that they don't experience that God state, while he does, and he said he would help them. And that he wasn't doing this for show or even as an expression of humility when he would bow down to them, wash their feet, give them money, doing all these things. He did it because of his love for humanity. This is really love in action. You know, this is really, this is something I have not seen anybody doing. Such things as this. And of course there were so many other things, you know, that Baba did in the course of his life. His life was so outstanding that I thought, if a person is to be measured by the deeds they do and the life they live, then the quality of his life was beyond what I would expect any human being to live. And then, of course, the other side of him, the divine side, in which he would later when I read into the book further, it answered my question. There was one part in which he was explaining who he is. And he would say, in this part he said, I am the highest of the high. I am the ancient one. I am God the beyond, and God in human form. when I take human form. This is some of the things he would say. And then he would explain how he had come throughout the ages as Zoroaster, as Ram, as Krishna, as Buddha, as Jesus, as Muhammad. Now he was here again as Meherabad. And I said, this all makes sense. That God is always the same, but he has different advents in different ages. And he said he was the highest of the high. I got to meet the highest of the high. If I never meet anyone else, I want to meet the highest of the high. Well, that made me decide to go to India and to meet Meherabad. I said, wherever he is, I'm going to go there. But I didn't know where he was. The book was not all that clear. I mean, it told the places that he had been and such. Just as I'm finishing this book, this librarian comes over, and he has a pile of magazines, which was the Awakener magazine that was published about Meherabad, all the different things that he did, the issues that would come out every few months or so.
Phyllis Fredericks.
Yeah, Phyllis Frederick had published it, and Warren Healy. Well, anyhow, he brings over a big stack like this, and he just puts it down on the table, and he says, I see that you're interested in that book of Meherabad, that Listen to Humanity book, and I have all these magazines here, you can look at them. And I said, well, I'm not really interested to read anything further. I've gotten the information that I really need, and it's not necessary. So he says, and I'm leaving it there for you, and he walks out. So now I have a pile of magazines. So I took one of them and I started to glance through it. And on the last page of that magazine was the names and addresses and phone number of the group, certain group heads in different parts of the country. And there was also for New York, where I was. So I thought, well, if I'm going to find out where Meherabad is, maybe it's a good idea I should just write down, their phone number. And that day, I remember, it was probably the next day, I went to look for a job. I really needed money. And I get a job as an usher in a theater. And they're playing a movie which is about the end of the world. And this movie kept playing and playing. It was on Broadway there. It was really very symbolic. It was like the end of my old world and the beginning of a new world coming up. But this was really a movie about the end of the world. And I got this usher job, and I was supposed to report the next day. But that night, I called up the Fred Nella Winterfeld. They were the ones in the back of the book to call up meetings. And I called them up, and I said, I would like very much to have the address of Meherabad. And they said, well, who is this? So I told them I had read this book about Meherabad, and I was planning to go see him, and I'd like to know where he is. So she was very sweet, Ella. She said, well, we'd be happy to tell you where he is and tell you anything you'd like to know, but we would like to meet you first. And we're having a meeting tomorrow night, and if you like to come to the meeting, then you can, see, we'll give you all the information. So I said, really, I don't want to go to any meetings. I'm not much used to meetings. I'm just going to meet Meherabad, and that would be sufficient. And she said, well, that's very nice, but I still think that we would like to meet you first, and then we'll give you the... I saw I wasn't going to get anywhere unless I went to the meeting. So I said, well, all right, I'll see. I said, but I have this job I'm starting. And I can't go. She says, that's okay. There's another meeting next week. So I thought, oh boy, I can't wait another week. And then I started to think, why am I here? Am I here for this job? Am I here to pursue this, my spiritual direction? Well, so the next day I called up the boss who had just hired me, and I said, you know, I don't think I can come into work today. I was supposed to come in today. I said, I don't think I can come into work today. I'm going to have to come in the next day. And you know, you don't really tell your bosses things that you're planning to do like that. They're the ones that tell you. So he says, we were expecting you. And I said, yes, I know that, but it's not possible. I just have to come in the next day. Is it all right? So he says, well, under one condition. I said, what? He says, you really do come in the next day. So I said, yes, I'll do it. So I went to the meeting. And a very amazing thing happened, because that day, and I remember this very distinctly, I don't know what it was that I started to worry and worry and worry. It was like I had the impressions of worrying. I mean, it was really a lot of worry. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I worrying so much? I don't even know what I'm worried about. But the impression of worrying went on all day long, and I was starting to think maybe I should take an aspirin or something, because I shouldn't go to this meeting because I'm not really in the good mental shape for this. But I went, and I remember that when I came to the threshold of the door, they had lived in this building, and I went to their apartment, and when they opened the door and I stepped over the threshold, now this really happened. This incredible heaviness and weight and worry, which is the best way I can describe it, lifted like mist. It just disappeared. And in its place, I experienced this incredible feeling of well-being. I mean, far more than just what I would normally feel, or what I think a person would normally feel. And as I was in the room there, it became more and more. This meeting was lasting about an hour, and it became so intense, and the presence of Baba became so strong that that I thought at any moment, if it gets any stronger, I'll actually see him appear. This is how intense it was. And they were all talking about, you know, reading some of the discourses of Baba and discussing it and such like that. And I thought, wow, this is really incredible. How come there aren't more people here? You know, I'm thinking about 10 people in the room. Maybe 15 people had come to the meeting. I said, this is so fantastic. You know, I can't imagine that people would be swamping to be in here. And when it was over with, when that meeting was over with, and we were all going out, I realized that not everybody was experiencing like me. This was something that was happening with me and not with all the others. They were in a very light and happy spirit, but nothing like what I was feeling. I could tell, because, you know, it was getting to be obvious. And that was the only time that happened to me like that. And I felt that Baba really wanted me to gain the conviction of who he really was by feeling his presence that strongly. Well, I was really now quite, I was really focused on meeting Baba now. And I knew that was my next step. I had to meet him. And I wrote a letter to Baba. And in this letter, I said, I addressed it to Baba, Dear Baba, I plan to come to see you, and I will be leaving in 2 weeks, and that I'm only writing because some of your followers here had said that I should contact you first to let you know that I would be going to see you and see if you have anything that you wanted to say, because people just didn't up and go to see Meherabad. I was pretty bold in what I was doing, and then I said that I expect to be leaving in 2 weeks, and if I receive a reply as to where you might be and how I can see you within that time span, then I would be happy to get that. Otherwise, I'll be on my way. I was not planning to hang around. But there was a problem. I had no money. And my plan was to work my way across on a ship, on a boat. That was how I planned to get there. But in the course of the 2 weeks, I couldn't get boats. They were pretty well tied up. You can't just get on a boat so easily. At least I wasn't able to. And so the weeks were turning into months. Oh, by the way, I got the message back. Within 2 weeks, a letter came back from Bob. And he said that I could come to see him for 1 hour only. And wherever he would be, and he gave the name of who I should call when I reached Bombay, and they would take me to see him wherever he was. They would bring me to him, to be with him for 1 hour, and then return back with his instructions. This was his letter, and it said, "Love, Meherabad," and I was really quite thrilled with the whole thing. Here's the letter from Bob. So I thought, well, now I have to get there, and the weeks were turning into months, and the months were going into like 6 months went by, and I still wasn't able to get there. Oh, brother. So one day, a letter comes from Baba's sister, Mani, and it was a circular that was distributed throughout to all of his lovers in the West. And this circular said that soon Meherabad would be entering seclusion, during which time he would not be receiving correspondence, nor would he be receiving any visitors, and only in an emergency would anybody be able to contact him by sending a telegram. So I thought, gosh, you know, Bob is going to go into seclusion, and it said for 6 months he would be going into this seclusion. I said, this is a long time. I don't know if I can stand this, that he should go into seclusion for 6 months, and it's been so long already, and now I'm still not there. I mean, I was getting desperate. In fact, I was desperate. I got so desperate, I didn't know what I was going to do about this here. I mean, I was really stuck. I had no money to go anywhere, and I was really stuck. So, all of a sudden, an idea comes. And it was a good idea. It was an idea. I should have done this in the first place. But this idea comes that, well, I'll tell you what I did. I sat down and I wrote another letter to Bob. I wrote Bob a letter. And in this letter I said, "Dear Baba, I want very much to have the benefit of your love, your direction, and your guidance. But the only thing preventing me from coming to see you is that I don't have the money to make this trip. And I can't see where money should stand in the way of such an ideal. But I know if it is your will, I'd be able to come and see you, providing it's your wish. Love, Irwin." And I said, and with this, you see, it wasn't just a letter. It was also taking him to be who he said he is. You know, he says, Meherabad would say that he was God in human form. I thought it would take an act of God to get me over there because nothing else worked. You know, and for 6 months, nothing, no matter what I did, would work out. So this letter went out, and I think also in about a week or so, I don't know how it came back so fast, Baba sent a reply, and it had only one sentence in this reply. And Baba said, "Don't worry, circumstances will adjust themselves. Love, Meherabad." So I thought, gee, this is great. I wonder what's going to happen. Well, do you know that within 2 weeks, it all came together in one day, whereas just as he said, you know, the circumstances of your life don't, you know, aren't favorable, it doesn't work out the way you have in mind or plan or whatever. all of a sudden everything came together just like it was meant to be, and I was off. I took off.
Where did you get the money? How to pay?
I'm going to tell you something about that. I'll come to that. So I left to go and see Baba, and I went on this jet plane. There was a lot that happened because of my father's opposition, and my brother was supposed to go, and oh brother, the things that happened, and Baba, my father called the cops on me and him, and I'm leaving out all the good stuff because I can't, it'll take forever if I tell you all the little incidents that happened. I want to get to the part where I met Baba. So, I arrived there, and I'm taken to Guru Prasad in Pune, where Baba was staying. And the car drives up, and Meherji was the disciple that was driving me to Baba's place. And he says to me, because I could see, that Baba was outside on the veranda, and he was standing there watching the car, waiting my arrival. And Meherji says, he's in the car with me, and he says, Baba is waiting for you, so go over to him. And so I scramble out of the car, and as I'm going over there, Baba has already gone inside. And I go inside to where the room is that Baba's in. And Baba's sitting in a chair like this, and there was a carpet, on the ground, and there was about, I should say on the floor of the room, and there was about 15 or so people sitting on the carpet, in front of Baba and his disciples, people that were under his direction. And as I walked in, I came in with this big garland because Meherji had thought it would be a good idea for me to get a garland for Baba, and I kept thinking, what do I need a garland for? I'm here. I don't need to represent myself with this garland, but he wanted me to get a garland. So I put the garland over Baba, and the first thing Baba did was take it right off. He went like this, gave it to somebody, and he just grabbed me like that. And he kissed me on both cheeks, and so we embraced, and then he had me sit near him, and the first thing he asked, where was Edward? That's my brother Edward. And I said to him, I told him the difficulties of what happened with my brother and how my father was trying to stop us and this and that and the other. And Baba said, it would have been better had you both come together, but you would have benefited more. But now Edward will benefit the same as you, even though he's there and you're here with me. This really did happen because my brother has an incredible story of what happened while I was in India with Baba, but we'll save that again for either later or another time. Then Baba asked, when I say Baba said or asked, he did it through his gestures. He was silent. But after a while, even though Erich was reading Baba's gestures, you sort of lost the thought that he was really silent because he was communicating so readily. I'm coming to the question that you asked, by the way. It's coming up right now. Right now. So, Baba asked me, how did you, let me see, I want to get the exact words that he said. Well, anyhow, he asked me how I had come. And I said, Baba, I was able to come because it was your will. And as soon as I said that, Baba had motioned like this to stand up and to repeat it to the group that was in the room. And I did. I stood up. I said, I'm here because it is Baba's will. And just then, someone else raised their hand from the back of the room and asked the question that you asked. But how did you get the money to come? See? And I was thinking at that time, that's not the point. The point is anything could have happened. Baba had said that circumstances would adjust themselves. Well, it could happen in 1,001 ways, whatever which way it is. but it was his will that made it possible. And as I'm thinking this, Baba goes like this. And Erich is reading Baba's essay. He said, that's not important. The way he said is how he came. And so that is what. Now, the actual circumstances of what occurred is a very interesting story, too. And I don't know that you want me to really get into all of it.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
You want to hear that? Oh,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
It's not sufficient that it wasn't important, but okay, I'll tell you. What happened is this. I had gone back to be with my dad at this time. And I was working with him in the real estate business. He did land subdivision. And he always wanted me to be doing the work with him. I wasn't all that interested because I had other interests. Real estate wasn't one of them. But anyhow, I was working with him. And he told me one day, he says, look, I'm going out of town. I'm going to go on vacation for a little while. I'm going to leave the business in your hands. And you can do some advertising or something and sell land and property, you know, as we had been doing. And he says, just take care of things while I go. And so he left. And I thought to myself, I just want to get to see Baba so bad, you know. And meantime, I had written this letter, and I got this message back from Baba, don't worry, circumstances will adjust themselves. So I'm thinking, you know, what could be done here? And I thought, you know, I think what I'm going to do, because we had like a section of land. Section means like 1 square mile. And the business was that we would subdivide it and sell it in small parcels. And so I thought, well, my father's gone, and he's expecting me to put these little ads in and just maybe sell it in parcels here and there. I'm going to put a full-page ad in the Miami Herald. I'm really going to sell this thing off. Either it's going to do or die. One of the things that's going to happen, we'll either do a smash business or we will do. He'll never ask me to ever run a business. But I had a motive. I wanted to get to Bob. You see, and I thought, well, this is the thing at hand. These are the things that I can do. Let's see what happens. I'm going to put a full-page ad in the Miami Herald on Saturday and a 3/4-page ad on Sunday. Now, you have to understand how this business works. The day you put the ad in, if it's Saturday, you'll only do business on Saturday and Sunday. Monday, it's like it never happened. And if it goes in also on Sunday, Monday, again, is as if it never happened. People will only come on those 2 days. So, for good measure, I decided to put a 3/4-page ad in on Sunday. Now, we have to understand that the price of ads are double on Sunday. So, this was no small expense. And I thought, well, we're going to see what happens. Now I'm going to try and sell out the whole thing if possible. So I make the arrangements, and the newspapers are getting ready to put this in. And now it's the middle of the week, and my father comes back from his trip.
Oh.
And he says, well, son, what have you done while I was away? I said, Dad, you're going to be very happy. And so I'm putting in a really nice ad for the property that we have. And he says, oh, well, that's very good, you know. I feel happy. His son is getting interested in the business now. And he says, can I see the ad? I said, sure. Wow, the proof, you know, the Herald gives you a proof of the a full page. Full page. And he looks at it, and it was a very nicely laid out ad. And he looks at this and he says, do you know how much this cost? I said, oh yes, it's going to be expensive, but just think of all the business it will bring. And he says, I think we're going to have to reduce the size of this ad and maybe you cancel it. I said, but besides that, there is another ad that's following. He he proves it. And he looks at that and he says, that's it, we can cancel it. Well, this is too much money. I said, no, don't think like that. It's going to be okay. He says, nothing doing. And he calls up the newspaper to cancel it. But guess what? It's too late. The deadline is passed. This is going in whether you want it or not. This is it. Okay, so Saturday comes. And he had a really big office. And there were all the salesmen were there. There were other salesmen too, you know, to sell. And there was, my father's very dramatic. He should have been an entertainer or an actor. He had a policeman at the door to welcome the people. Nowadays, it would scare anyone away, but in those days, it sort of had a welcoming feeling to it. And everybody was dressed up, you know, tie and jacket and flower. There was movie projectors to show the property, and there was all kinds of things set up. And we all got there. It was 8 in the morning, and people would often start to come early. So it's 8 o'clock, and it's 9 o'clock, and it's 10 o'clock, and it's 11 o'clock, and we don't have one person coming, which is already amazing. And everybody is waiting there. It's all the nice salesmen and people waiting to, you know, for somebody to come in. 12 o'clock comes, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and there's not one single person that comes in. Finally, this lady comes in. It was really something. She comes in and she says, you know, I don't have $25 to put down as a down payment, but I do have $5. Could I put it down towards the down payment? Yes. And by the time the day was over, we had $5. That was it. And that was Saturday. And my father really took it like a real sport, I must say. He did not harangue me or harass me or anything. He just said, well, we'll just see what happens tomorrow. And, you know, by the look of things, things weren't going so well. So we're all there again, 8 o'clock now, right? 8 o'clock, and everybody's waiting, and the policeman is at the door. The lights are on, and all things, and the whole thing is ready to go. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, it's getting to be 12 o'clock. Half of the day is almost gone. And I remember I was looking at the clock, I was seeing it, it was just about to hit 12 o'clock. And I said in my mind to Baba, I said, Baba, I need a miracle now, because if I don't get one immediately, I'm not going to be able to get to see you. This is the best that I can do. And just then it's 12 o'clock. And when it hits 12 o'clock, all of a sudden you start to hear this sound. It's like a sound. And it's like a rumbling sound at first. It's getting louder and louder and louder. And it really starts to get loud. And everybody is noticing this sound. We're all in the office there and we're listening. And the sound is getting louder. And, you know, they're looking around, you know, and it's getting closer to this sound. This sound isn't just getting loud, it's like getting closer, and it's getting closer, and then all of a sudden, when it got real loud, we had these double doors, they burst open like that, and this incredible mob of people. Have you ever seen these mad comic books where they have all these compressed people, and in 1 second, the entire office, and I don't mean 10 seconds, the whole place was just filled with people instantly. It was like amazing, and the phones started to ring. And they all wanted to know, what do you have and how can we buy it? 5 acres, 10 acres, can I get 30 acres? And then I put down $1,000 instead of $25. I mean, it was like, you hardly had to say anything. You didn't have to do much. And the phone started to ring, and people were calling up, and they were saying, I'm sorry we couldn't come in. Would you please send somebody over? We want to get some of the land. And it just was going, literally ringing off the hooks. And from 12 o'clock until 6 o'clock that evening, it went nonstop. Nonstop. And we did an incredible business, to say the least. So came 6 o'clock, and it was now over. Everything stopped. And we had all these contracts signed, and it was like amazing. I'm telling you what happened. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So then I said, I felt I could say this now to my father. I said, Dad, I think we had a pretty good day. He said, well, I've had some pretty good ads too, I said, I know you have. But I do plan to go to India. I would like very much to see Meherabad, and I feel like I've earned the money to do so. So he says to me this statement that he makes. He says, oh, it was never the money. I said, then what was it? He says, it's the principle of the thing. It's such a waste of money and time. And I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to go to India, and this man says he's God, and you're just going to believe that, and you're just going to go over there, and you're going to, what do you think is going to happen? He'll send you home after you're there. And you'll be back to where you started, and you will have spent all this money to get there and to do this here. So he says, I can't allow that. You're not in your right mind. You wouldn't be in your right mind if you did that. So I said, you mean that you would have not minded my going, and the money would have not been no problem had you agreed with it, but now this is the principle of the thing for you. Is that right? He said, yes, you're my son, and I have to, think of it. Well, I was only 23, okay? I was certainly old enough to do what I wanted to do. So I said to my father, I said, well, Dad, it's the principle of the thing for you, but it's also the principle of the thing for me, because I don't see it like you do. But just the same, so I couldn't argue with him about it. And he was really dead set in his mind. So I thought, well, I felt I earned the right, and I was just going to leave anyhow, and just with or without his permission. And so when I went to see Baba, this is how it happened. And I also knew that Baba, being who he is, if there would ever be a good understanding in the family, it would have to come through a divine source. And not just, in spite of the fact that my father was opposed to this, in the long run I felt he would thank me for it. But he wasn't going to thank me for it then.
Irwin?
Yeah.
I'd like to know what Bob said to you when you actually...
What?
What were some of the things that Bob said to you when you actually were there with Bob?
Okay, well, I was coming to that. So I told Baba some of the things that happened here. And now I'm with Baba. And all of a sudden, Baba sort of turns and he says, how long were you to be here? And I remembered that Baba had said like 6 months ago in that letter that I could come for 1 hour only. So I said, Baba, you said I could stay for 1 hour. And he says, what time is it? He said, Erich said the time. Baba looked at me and he smiled and said, it's already 2 or 3 hours. How can this be? Oh, Baba. He says, he points to someone else. How can this be? They didn't know either. Each person he was pointing to, nobody knew anything. So then Baba became more serious. He said, all right, I want you to be here every morning at 7:30. And you'll remain with me until lunch, and Marriage will take you to your hotel for your lunch and bring you back and stay with me until I dismiss everyone. And now my 1 hour stay has suddenly turned into an indefinite stay, which just suited me fine because there was no, I didn't want to leave. After being with Baba for a short time, I felt he really was everything he said he was. And I wanted to stay there and live with Baba if I could. I'd like to remain with Baba. But you see, I do have to say this. My intention of seeing Baba was not just to go and visit Baba, to become his disciple and like that. That was not my intention. My intention was to know him as he really is, to experience the infinite state that Baba speaks about, that he has come to give us. And I remember there was one line in the book in which Baba said that he had come to give liberation. And I felt I had come to get liberation. So we should get together, right? He comes to give it, we should get together with the one who wants to get it and make a good team. Well, anyhow, that was my view. And I really did want to know Baba as he really is. I felt that was the goal of life. That's what Baba had talked about. But Baba was so loving, and he was really great. So one day he says to me, "You were sent to me by another master." And he didn't explain. But you have to understand the way it happened that he said that. It was sort of very offhanded. It wasn't like, he was conversing with me and said it. He was, there were others that he was saying things, and then he just sort of turned to me like that and just said that. And it was like a person is reading a book and happens to find something of some interest that stands out in the book and just happens to look up, and whoever happens to be handy says it to that person, and goes back to the book. Well, that was the manner in which it happened. It was like Baba, and I knew this was true, would look at the history of a soul and how that person, through their lifetimes had actually what they had to do to come to him. And then he might say something about it, and you would hear that. But it was not something that you would elaborate on or talk much about.